Good day. I'm Gerald Goldfarb, and this is the television interview discussion program Inside Law. What we do on this program is have discussions with leading lawyers and judges in the Southern California community with the idea of helping the public, you folks out there, understand what's really happening inside the legal system, how the legal system really works. We have a lot of television programs nowadays like L.A. Law, which give a somewhat romanticized and fictionalized account of the legal system, and we hope that this program can give the realistic and inside picture. I'm very happy and proud to have on the show today as my special guest the Honorable Joan Dempsey Klein. Thank you for being here with us today,
Thank
Justice
you. I'm pleased
Klein.
to be here.
Justice Klein is really one of the most eminent women jurists in the United States. She started off as a lawyer with the Attorney General's office in California, was appointed by Governor Pat Brown in 1964 to the municipal court, where she sat for about 10 years, being the presiding judge of the municipal court. I first encountered her there when I was a young lawyer, and she was running the show with a very stern hand, as she still does today in the courts she sits in. In '74, she ran for the Superior Court and was elected, served on the Superior Court for 4 years, and then was appointed in 1978 by Governor Jerry Brown to the California Court of Appeal, where she still sits, and sits as the presiding justice of Division III of the California Court of Appeal. She also has a very broad and interesting career in associated activities and civic activities in the legal system. I can't tell you everything she's done. It would take up the whole half hour, really. But most importantly, Justice Klein has been the founding president of the National Association of Women Judges and the founding president of California Women Lawyers. So she's been very active in the meeting of the legal system and the feminist movement in this country. So again, I'm very happy to have you with us here, Justice Klein. And let me start off the discussion by simply asking you, you have been a judge for 23 odd years, or 23 even years, and you've seen a lot of changes, I imagine. Can you give us a little bit of an overview how the legal system appears to you to have changed or not changed in the years you've observed it?
I don't know that it has changed that substantially. We're still overworked, underpaid. There's always gridlock, and we have the same kinds of problems with good lawyers and not so good lawyers, pressures. I don't know that I have seen a substantial change. If I would say I had seen one major change, I would tell you it was the inclusion of more women in the bar and on the bench. And that is, of course, a substantial change during my tenure on the bench.
Well, I want to get on to that subject of women in the law, but before I do, I just want to verify this point, because people nowadays in the public have the idea, I think, that the legal system is getting so terribly overcrowded and that cases don't move in an orderly manner. And I know it takes 5 years to get to trial in Los Angeles Superior Court for the typical case. You think this is exaggerated by the press, and the system is running about the same now as 20 years ago?
But it was the same 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. We still had the problems of not enough judges. We're talking the trial bench now. Mm-hmm. When you talk the Court of Appeals, we're doing pretty well. Mm-hmm. We're pretty much up to date on our cases. You lodge your case with the Court of Appeal, and you will get it heard within 6 months. And what is usually that happens is that when the counsel get to, the record gets lodged with the Court of Appeal, and then the lawyers start asking for continuances because they haven't had time to get their briefs in and prepared. But you want your case heard, we'll get it heard in the Court of Appeal. You're talking the trial court.
The trial court
have been slow for the entire time that I've been associated with them.
Well, let me just tell the public a little bit how the courts of appeal work. I don't think the public know. I'll just do 30 seconds on the Court of Appeal, ladies and gentlemen. If you lose in the Superior Court is the court of general trial jurisdiction in Southern California, throughout the state of California. If you lose, you have a chance to go to a higher court, the Court of Appeal, where 3 justices, theoretically, review your case and decide if the judge in the Superior Court made a mistake. this is a civil case or a criminal case. If the judge in the Superior Court made a serious mistake and the mistake resulted in a miscarriage of justice, then the Court of Appeal will overturn the decision of the Superior Court and usually grant you a new trial. But you don't reverse the Superior Courts very often in the Court of Appeal. How come?
I hope not. If we did, there'd be something wrong with the judges sitting on the Superior Court. And we have probably one of the best Superior Courts in the entire world in the state of California. Good judges. And no, we do not reverse them that frequently, I'm happy to say. What? I don't know what the percentage of reversals is. 5, 10, 15% max. Same way with the criminal cases. You know, one of the things that's causing the great impact on the courts is the number of criminal cases that have to be tried.
And those cases have priority.
And they have priority for obvious reasons, and there's a freebie on the appeals. If anybody wants to appeal and can't afford an attorney will be appointed to represent them, not only at the trial level, but also at the appellate level.
Well, on the civil side, you have to pay for your own lawyer.
You pay for your own lawyer.
So you may think twice before you fork over thousands of dollars for an appeal.
That's very true.
Now, when you review these appeals, the lawyers put in briefs. There's no new evidence in the Court of Appeal.
No new evidence.
It's just a review of what happened in the Superior Court. The lawyers put in briefs, and then there's an oral argument, and then a decision comes down.
That's true.
Now, to what extent...
The different concept about the appeal, and I think people ought to realize this, is based on 3 heads are better than 1. And that's something Justice O'Connor wrote on a picture to me. The picture of herself and myself and one other woman judge. 3 heads are better than 1, and that's just kind of says it all. And that's the way we look at them in the Court of Appeal. We put 3 heads on it and review what happened down below with one judge sitting and decide whether a mistake was made.
Now, I do a lot of appeals in the Court of Appeal, and I've always been interested to know, I know you also have 3 judges, but each judge has several clerks. And I know the clerks do a lot of work to process these cases and prepare them for the judges' decisions. Now, do the judges actually read all the briefs that come in? Do the judges actually decide these cases? Or are some of the minor cases being decided by clerks and just kind of rubber stamped by judges?
Well, first of all, you have to realize that a great number of the cases that come through, whether they be criminal or civil, are rather mundane and ordinary garden variety cases, wherein an exercise of judgment is not a very big factor. In those cases, it's pro forma in terms of the appeal. However, I don't think there is a judge sitting on the Court of Appeal who does not read all the briefs in each of his or her sets of cases. That does not necessarily mean that that judge reads all the briefs in the cases on which that judge is one of the co-authors. So you read all the briefs, and you work with your research attorneys, and you have an impression as to how you think the case should go after you read the briefs. You say to your attorneys, let's research the law and see if this is the way it ought to go. If there are changes, if we haven't received all the law here, let's find out what it is. If there is a difference of a position that we ought to take here, we'll do it. So there isn't, I don't believe, a single research attorney who is calling any shots up there. That doesn't happen. What the justices are paid for is their judgment, their judgment. And they are experienced people, they've been around a long time, and that's what the public is paying them for. Research attorneys do the research, they may even prepare draft opinions for the justices, and a lot of them do. But it's the judgment, and obviously that's the key factor in these cases.
Well, all right. I'm glad to hear that. That makes me relieved. I'm glad the judges are reading my briefs. I'm working real hard. I'm working real hard on them. I want them to be read.
Okay.
Now, I'm interested in the women's movement and how it interacts with the legal system, particularly because it always seemed to me that that women would be humanizing, as women got more power in the society at large, that women would be a humanizing and positive influence on the society. And I know that in recent years, women have had a lot more authority in the legal system. When I started to practice law, you hardly ever encountered a woman lawyer. When I was in law school, there were 500 lawyers in my class at law school, and I think 5 of them were women. And now, of course, a great many women are going into the legal system. And I wonder, do you think that are women just men with skirts in the legal system, or are they putting in a little different impact or a different take on the world?
Well, you know, let's put it this way. Half of the entire world is composed of women. Let's face it. More than half of the world is women. Is or are? Anyway, women. Law schools have gone from what your situation is, and when I was there, there were 3 of us in the graduating class out of 90, and 200 of us who started, there were 8. Now the classes are 40 and 50% women all over the United States, and by an interesting phenomenon. And I've done a great deal of traveling, not only for the United States government, but with a number of groups of women judges around the world. This phenomenon is taking place in other countries, South America, in the Orient, and et cetera. These people are graduating. They're coming into the law. They are feminist in their approach. They're concerned about themselves. They're concerned about the plight of less fortunate women. They are having a big impact on the nature of the laws that are passed, the manner in which the judiciary, the court system looks at women, and the way in which women are sentenced in court, the domestic relations, new rape laws, incest laws, child care concerns, all these things, I think, and if you look over the past 20 years at the impact of a difference on all these sets of laws, I think that impact is as a consequence of women finally being in a position to call some shots. California Women Lawyers is a profound lobbying organization.
What sort of lobbying does that organization do?
Well, what it does...
What's the result of its work?
The result of its work is that it not only drafts legislation, but it takes a stand on the pending legislation and indicates that point of view to the legislators. It also comes in AC in cases that are pending in court, writes what we call friend of court briefs on one side or the other. The California Women Lawyers is sufficiently potent an organization now, is a statewide organization of women lawyers, that the legislatures pay some attention. The legislators pay considerable attention to it as a body.
Let's maybe just speak a little bit more specifically about some of these changes. For example, sexual harassment. When I was a young lawyer, there was no such thing as that I remember as a lawsuit for sexual harassment, and now there have been some really that's a going cause of action, and you can get a real recovery for a woman in that kind of case, can't you?
Indeed, you can. I think Gloria Allred has been eminently successful in court with a number of these cases. And just recently, the City Commission on the Status of Women has conducted a study of women workers, about 5,000 of them, and came out with the unglorious statistic of 30% of them, about a third of them, felt they had been sexually harassed on the job, mostly in those areas that are dominated by men, like the law enforcement areas and tree trimmers and a couple of other areas. And that these women felt that they weren't able to do anything about that because they thought they'd lose their jobs, quite frankly. And they didn't think they'd get the support of the city people.
This kind of conduct...
But you see, that's new. And 20 years ago...
It was acceptable to harass women. It was considered fun. Good, healthy male fun. And a woman had to giggle and take it, didn't she?
And if a woman broached that subject, she'd get looked at like, what's the matter with you, lady? Are you something off the wall here or what? Now it's an acceptable topic to be discussed, and it's recognized as a problem, and that a solution ought to be had to it.
And the divorce laws, the dissolution laws have been changing. I notice in the dissolution practice, men and the women each have their own grievances, and each think the other sometimes is getting the better of the deal. But there have been a lot of changes to protect women's rights in recent years. I think in terms of the woman who puts her husband through professional school and then he wants to divorce her, she's got some rights, doesn't she?
Yes, she has rights. She has some rights to have in effect, hubby put her through. But that has worked as a two-edged sword, the so-called no-fault divorce now, with the contemplation and the equal division of properties.
Yes.
The problem with that is that some of the judges have said, aha, I got you now. Because in theory, women are equal. In practice, they certainly are not. They earn 60 cents on the dollar, and they do not run the businesses. When a family splits, The husband takes the business and continues to run the business. The wife maybe gets the house. She goes out and gets, if she hasn't worked, she gets a two-bit job. If she has worked, she's working at something less in a
So we have like a
sense.
feminization of poverty kind of phenomenon.
You've got it. Coming out of the dissolution laws, even though the modification of the dissolution laws was something that was felt to be for the benefit of women. It in some cases has not worked that way. In other cases, and you will find in other ways, there has been some recognition of women's rights, like in the case that you just mentioned, for hubbing through either law school or med school, and then divorce ensues, and the woman has an opportunity to have the community pay for her education after that.
You think the time will come when instead of having token women on, you were a token woman in the first place maybe.
Oh, sure.
Know, but there are more women coming on the court. So we ever get a situation where the women, instead of having one woman on the Supreme Court, we'll have three women on the Supreme Court and no one will think twice about it?
Well, I hope so. Governor Brown, Jerry Brown, did quite well by appointing women. And he put women all throughout the appellate system, which is the first time that women have sat in any numbers on the appellate courts. And of course, he put the first woman on the Supreme Court. This governor is doing a pretty good job. Governor Duke Majan has thus far appointed about 80 women to the courts in the state of California. And every indication indicates that he will, or predicts that he will continue to do that. And I'm pleased to see it. And he has put a woman on the Court of Appeal in San Diego.
I we still need a woman on the California Supreme Court.
Well, a lot of people were disappointed by that. But logically speaking, who would he pick? If he looked at all the women sitting on the appellate court, who were the natural people to look for purposes of moving them to the Court of Appeal, we were all appointed by Jerry Brown. And with the exception of Mildred Lilly, and she is considered of a certain age that one would not move her to the Supreme Court. And but for that, I think she would have gone. But he is going to have to groom his own people for the Supreme Court.
Yes.
I mean that is a plum for the appointing authority.
And I think that actually, in view of the Supreme Court we have now in California, they probably need a feminizing influence up there. It's too much.
Yeah, I would love to see
a men's club.
Yes, and I would very much like to see a woman sitting on that court. And I agree with you that I think with the increased number of women coming into the profession and functioning and becoming more prominent on the bench, doing a good job, and being with the major law firms and getting the ears of the O'Melby and Myers, key partners, and the Gibson Dunners, and becoming more active in politics, that it will become a reasonable thing for two women on the United States Supreme Court, two women on the Court of California. Now, one of these years.
One thing that I'm interested in.
With the salary levels as low as they are, the men may decide to not serve on the courts, and the courts may become predominantly women one of these days.
Well,
how do you like that?
That's one of the things that I notice is happening, that the lawyers are making so much money in the private practice that the salaries of your salary is a matter of public record. What is your salary on the Court of Appeal?
I don't know. I think it's about $95,000.
Yeah, well,
some people think that's a lot of money.
Seems like a lot of money to the lay person.
On the other hand, if I were out working in private practice, I could probably make $250,000 a year. Plus, if I wanted to leave the bench now and go out and function as a rent-a judge, I could probably make $100,000 to $200,000. Well, in any event, in 1 year, I could make more than I make now, and I've been sitting in this job for a long, long time. And you can't blame some judges if they think, you know, I've really had it up to here. By the time they take this out and this out and this out, what I take home is a very small salary.
Yeah, of course, you don't have to worry about your overhead now. We lawyers in private practice, we have to pay our bills.
That's true.
So that cuts the other way.
That's true.
But you mentioned the rent-a-judge system, and I know that I had Judge Choate was a guest on our show a few weeks ago, and he has recently retired from the Superior Court and is working for the Judicial Mediation Service. I forget exact title, but basically he's a rent-a-judge, and people who are having disputes can hire these retired judges on an hourly basis, pay them a handsome amount of money, and have their disputes resolved outside the legal system that the ordinary citizen follows.
Correct.
Now, I wonder if you have any thoughts about that, because I think it confuses people a bit.
Well, what in effect you have is a private judiciary functioning alongside the public paid-for judiciary. Private judiciary is paid for by the lawyers who want to resolve the case, in effect. Getting your case resolved by the regular court system is a public operation. I guess people feel that a service is being performed by a private judiciary, and it does take a great deal of workload off of the court system, unquestionably. However, it is creating a system of justice that is approachable only by people with a lot of money.
So we have like two tracks of justice developing, one the rich track and one the ordinary track.
If you can pay to get your case resolved speedily, you can privatize the process and get it done. If you can't, you've got to get in line in the public financed court system, and it may take you 5 years to get your case to trial in the superior courts. There's something wrong about that concept. It kind of relieves the pressure of the public to recognize the need to pay some more money for the court system. And the amount of money that the public pays for a court system is minuscule when compared to other aspects. And it's probably one of the most important aspects of all public government, in my book. And I have some reservations about the privatization of that hunk of the judiciary, because I see so many people going into it. And I have another concern. And you and I were discussing this before we went on camera here. And that is this business of these rent-a-judges are obviously people who have to be called upon to work over and over again, and the major firms can afford to rent them. And if you, Joe Dokes, come in before I as a rent-a-judge, and against you is somebody from one of the hotshot law firms, from which I think I'm going to get a lot more business, I may find that my decision-making process is slightly shaded, maybe not even consciously, by looking at your client versus somebody else's client, you see? And these cases are going to come before the Court of Appeal, and I would suggest to you that in the not-too-distant future there will be a fact situation which will reflect this sort of thing, and some question will be made of it in an appellate case, because these cases come through the privatization process, then they come into the public court system for the judgments to be certified or something of that effect, and then they are looked at by the Court of Appeal.
I'm also troubled by the fact that the leading rent-a-judge firm, I think, has about 20 retired judges. And it's not just older judges, it's some of the judges in the prime of their judging, when they really finally have mastered the legal system, understand how it works, and are ready to be great judges or excellent judges, and then they leave the system, they retire on a pension, and maybe they're only 55 years old or something like that, and then they're doubling their money on the rent-a-judge side, and the system, which has kind of trained them, is deprived of wonderfully experienced judges and has stuck with novice judges.
I agree with that. However, it's hard to blame them when, let's say, you take a Superior Court judge who at 56, 57 put in his 20 years and is making what, $70,000, $80,000 a year, and is looking at the prospect of making $150,000, $200,000 out there. Sees a chance to have a few more vacations, clean up the house a little bit, maybe pay for the last kid going through school or whatever it might be.
We get to money here in this conversation, and we always do in this country. And one of the things that I want to ask you about, and I think one of the things that troubles the public, is that I think nowadays lawyers, I was reading an article recently by Pat Wald, who's on the United States Court of Appeal in the District of Columbia, and she pointed out how lawyers are being viewed these days as so extremely interested in money that some of the professional quality has been lost. Traditionally and historically, a profession was a group of people who did a form of public service and received fair remuneration. There was something different. A professional was not supposed to be a rabid capitalist. And nowadays the lawyers are viewed, I think, as rabid, money-interested people, and I think it's harmed our reputation. And Pat, in her article, said, well, maybe the pendulum is turning back in the direction of public service and away from the extreme zeal for money that we've seen in the Reagan years. But I haven't noticed that. Have you noticed a bit of that?
I don't know that I've noticed it in a discernible manner. I have noticed During the Reagan years, capitalism was, of course, the virtues of it were extolled. Greed was not a dirty word. It was a virtue, and the yuppies were all to get rich in Wall Street, and the lawyers were to make a buck, and kids that went through school were interested in getting out of school with a piece of paper that they could earn some money with and get the home and the cars and the da-da-da-da-da. But maybe, I think always there has been that eagerness and effort by young people. There is just a shift, I think, in the emphasis. I think we've seen it come to its zenith in the last 8 years, hopefully. I think the emphasis will shift, and I agree with Pat to the extent that I think the pendulum will move a little bit now, where we have really evaluated a little bit a chosen profession and say, well, you know, what is it all about? Just a money-grubbing scheme here?
Yeah, I hope
am
right.
I at all concerned about my fellow humanity out there?
I have to interrupt now. I think you're right, but I'm getting the wrap sign here.
Oh, are you really?
Yes, we really are.
That's
so we have to bring this program to a close. It's great talking to you, Justice Klein. You're a wonderful guest, and I always enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for being with us. I'm Gerald Goldfarb. This has been the television program Inside Law. I hope that if anyone is interested, they can write to Inside Law in care of this station. Thank you very much for being with us today, ladies and gentlemen, and we hope you'll be looking at our program in future months. Good day.
You gotta be kidding.
For further information, please call Inside Law at area code 213-285-8599.